Hi, I'm Carlie Trosclair, and I'm the 2023 Louisiana State Fellow for Visual Arts. I spent over 10 years in St. Louis, Missouri, and that really kind of formed my practice. And a lot of the work that I was doing was in vacant and abandoned buildings, and I was really interested in the different layers that had built up over time. And that's where kind of this pull to genealogy or archaeological surface textures really came into my practice. And then when I moved back to New Orleans, I realized that I was from a historic city. It was like I had to move away to really re-ground myself in the place that I was from. So in the past couple years, what I've been doing is kind of focusing on the remembering of the place that I am from. So it means a lot to me to get this fellowship in my home state and to represent Louisiana, because it feels like a welcoming back, and it really kind of helps ground and position my practice as I know and learn more about myself and how my work relates to the place that I'm from. For me, the work that I make is really site-specific. So when I first moved back to New Orleans, I was at an artist residency, and I was really diving deep into the history and the architecture of New Orleans. And I found that there was a lot of fertile ground there that I hadn't explored yet. And I kind of take that mentality with me everywhere that I go, like learning about the place that I'm in. I've made work site-specific to Maine and St. Louis, and everything is about kind of understanding the place that I'm in and learning about the architectural history, kind of as a stand-in for what it's like to live there and what everyday life is there. And then I kind of make decisions based on how the architecture relates back to the natural environment. So when I moved back to New Orleans, a lot of what I was feeling after being away in the Midwest was this kind of overwhelming presence of kind of the next natural disaster, and just having that be at the forefront of what I was thinking about in my practice. And it really pushed the precarity of existence kind of to the forefront, and how it feels to kind of just be in between hurricanes. So I think what it's done for my practice has really made me more aware and more kind of sensitive to the ephemerality of existence. The idea of an architectural skin was always present in my practice, and I was interested in the different layers that had built up over time, specifically the surface and textural layers. And latex for me really became this beautiful bridge of kind of encapsulating and imprinting a moment in time of that building's history, surface history. And then also because latex is a natural material, it will shift and change over time. So within itself, it is this temporary moment of a place that then exists in the form that it's cast, also for a very short amount of time. So it's work that I will need to kind of take care of and to mend along the way. When I was in St. Louis, I was really drawn to vacant and abandoned buildings, and the way that their exposure to the elements really kind of exposed the different layers in the buildup of time, whether it was decorative layers that different residents had made or structural kind of upkeep. And so what I was interested in there was creating designs within those layers to reveal the history. So it was in response to what was happening with the way that nature and architecture were kind of working together. Also, I spent some time in Maine, and I was really taken aback by the shift in the tides. So the tides would rise as high as 24 feet down to -2, and to me, just that image and knowing that the water would kind of rise and fall that drastically really impacted me in the way that it related to how water affects us back home in New Orleans. So when I was in Maine, what I did was take a latex cast that I made there and set it into the bay and photograph it and video it as the tide was kind of slowly rising and engulfing the work, and then videoed it kind of going back down. So really just like making the connections between how we interact with and work with or against the natural environment in New Orleans, but also kind of taking that mentality wherever I go when I'm traveling and doing artist residencies, and learning about the ways that architecture exists within those spaces and making the connections between. I keep the latex at a really thin consistency. The latex acts as this residual of a space and of the architecture, much like cicada shells or snake skin. So for me, it really is a metaphor for growth and change, and this idea of death and rebirth, and just looking at how nature affects those shifts that happen in architecture and the way that that affects us on the Gulf South.